Coming up in this Torah portion,
It's a foreign ruler having a dream and a Hebrew is interpreting. We see that other places in the Bible.
we're going to talk about magic, magicians. First time appears in this Torah portion.
Joseph wins cool prizes because of his interpretive ability.
And what does that mean for his children, Manasseh and Ephraim? She's not Jewish.
The boys get together. They all come together.
Does he have a dividing cup?
Let's get into it.
G'day, dear viewers, and thank you for your company once again here on truth2u.org. That's truth2u.org. I'm Jono, and joining me from the Horeb Institute in Louisiana is, of course, the author of the Moses Scroll, Seth Nichols. G'day, mate.
Hello, my friend. How are you?
Doing pretty well, thank you, my friend. Of course, time for season 3 of Torah Pearls, and we're in Miketz, and of course, Torah Pearls is brought to you by TanakTours.com, T-A-N-A-K-H. Book it before the new year, and you're going to save some money. Let's see. Season 3, I tell you what, Ross, it is in, as we always say at the beginning of these programs, in light of critical scholarship and the proto-biblical Dead Sea Scroll known as the Moses Scroll. And when I first had a look at this one, I thought, I don't know if there's that much Moses Scroll that we can squeeze into this one, maybe nothing at all. But as I went through it with a little bit more detail, there's a couple of things. We're going to get there eventually. Right. But I may kick off with the questions and comments. Oh, a couple more comments. Just quickly, Mama MacGyver, again, left an excellent comment. And she was just saying, in regards to Clody's last question regarding which source favors Judah more.
Right.
She's reading, and I have it here, who wrote the Bible. She's reading Richard Elliott Freeman's book. And she said on page 46, it says that J for Judah, E for Israel. But going to page 51, she says the person who wrote, and she's quoting the person who wrote J, was partially concerned with the kingdom of Judah, and the person who wrote E was particularly interested, rather, in the kingdom of Israel. So there he does confirm, she says, J's favor towards Judah, and she said that's where she's up to in the book. That
is a good book. That is
a good book.
Yeah,
everyone should get that and have a bit of a read. We're going to see more of that, by the way. J and E and the sides in which they take a little bit more in this Torah portion. She goes on to say, by the way, Ross, she says, talking about my newfound revelation of Moses not being the only author of the Pentateuch has proven to come with some pushback, right?
Really?
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, we see it.
We see it. Yeah, we
right.
feel it. Yeah, it's not a popular topic, but it is a fascinating one, and one you can't ignore. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. As I think Clody put it one time, and she said the thing I have on my side though is the truth and much scholarly information to back it, and most certainly that is true. Endemic Christian 335 said, "Love Ross and Jono's analysis and commentary. Thank you so much for these teachings. Well, we appreciate the encouragement."
Absolutely.
All right. We are in Torah portion, Miketz, and joining us, of course, is our AI critical scholar, Ezra. G'day, Ezra. And we're going to kick off, and maybe, Ezra, you can tell us, let's try something different. Are there any major misconceptions about the Torah portion, Miketz?
Oh, absolutely. One of the big misconceptions about Miketz is that it's entirely about Joseph's personal vindication and rise to power. While his ascent to Pharaoh's second-in-command is a central piece, the portion is as much about divine providence as it is about political acumen. People often gloss over how Joseph's interpretation of Pharaoh's dreams is framed not as his personal wisdom, but as a revelation from God. Another common misunderstanding is the assumption that Joseph's interactions with his brothers are purely vengeful. The narrative actually shows him carefully testing their integrity and repentance, rather than simply retaliating for their earlier betrayal. The famine and the brothers' desperation serve as a backdrop to explore themes of transformation and reconciliation. Additionally, some readers tend to view Pharaoh's dream and Joseph's rise in isolation from broader Egyptian culture. But the story subtly critiques the centralization of power and wealth through Joseph's economic policies, which ultimately enslaved the Egyptian population to Pharaoh, a point often overlooked in favor of Joseph's personal success. All these layers remind us that Miketz isn't just about Joseph's journey. It's a deeply woven tapestry of family dynamics, divine intervention, and societal commentary.
Interesting.
Pondering.
Yeah.
Pondering. It kicks off, Ross, in chapter 41. And
Right.
the first thing that caught my eye was verse 8, where we encounter magicians. And I think that this is the first time that we encounter magicians. And
I
the
think
next
so.
time that we encounter magicians is with Moses and also in Pharaoh's court, which I find interesting. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah. First of all, let's tie that what you just said also with something that Ezra brought up, and that is that there is some overlap between the story in that we meet in the Joseph saga and what we meet in the Exodus narrative, which is coming.
Mm.
And two examples. One you just brought up, the magicians. My God is bigger than your God. That's the name of the game. And so you see that it's basically pitting the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob through Joseph's work against the gods of Egypt in this
Hmm.
case.
Mm.
Now, the other thing that I find interesting is that there is this interconnectedness in the narratives, even beyond what we see in J, E, P, D, any of that. And one example is one that Ezra brought up, and that is that just as Joseph ultimately enslaves the Egyptian people, so too later will the Egyptian people enslave the children of Israel. So
Yeah.
it's almost like that kind of thing. The reader, it doesn't really spell it out like, hey, look at this, but it's subtle things like that that we have to watch for.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, no, that's true. Uh, I find this interesting because the magicians, Pharaoh says, hey, had this crazy dream. You guys are the magicians. This is your job. And he tells them, and none of them can tell him the meaning. It's as if, I had this dream about the cows and about this and that, 7 of these and da-da-da-da-da. Anyone?
You know what
And
I call that dream, the two dreams?
what do you call it?
Steers and ears. Steers and ears come from Egypt.
Steers and
Just
ears.
that's right.
Well, evidently they do. I find it a little bit unbelievable, and it's again just like the cupbearer and the what was it? The cupbearer and the baker.
Yep.
They had dreams that they couldn't understand. God wasn't going to tell them. Like evidently gave them this vivid dream. Wasn't going to tell them what it meant, and this was the opportunity for Joseph to shine. Again, Pharaoh has the dream, doesn't know what it means, puts it to the guys that he employs, and they're not even offering anything, which would be unusual because usually the people that know, particularly the magicians or the clairvoyants or whoever it is, are very, very eager to jump in and tell you, oh, well, let me tell you, because I'm the wise one, let me tell you what this means. And but they're not going to do that because we need the opportunity for Joseph to shine, and this is what is presented here. What else you want to
Yeah,
bring up
before you
here?
jump off of that, one of the things that I find interesting, and I'm not sure yet what this means, Jono, but I find it a very interesting parallel that what we find in the story of Joseph, this Hebrew, who is interpreting a dream for a foreign ruler, we also find in the book of Daniel and mainly in Daniel chapter 2 and chapter 5. Very, very similar. Same thing. It's like you have to tell me, and I'm not going to tell you I'm not going to tell you the dream. I want you to tell me the dream and what it means. So it's really making it a lot harder. But
And you know what? You
yeah,
know what's really interesting about that, though, Ross, is that Pharaoh doesn't know what it means. He's looking for an interpretation,
oh
and
yeah, that's right.
as if to
Yeah.
say that he knows it when he hears it, but he doesn't know it until he hears it. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I thought about that. I wonder if maybe he doesn't. I don't think he has any idea, but maybe that's
in
it.
which
Maybe
case,
he
the
just
magicians
figures.
could have the magicians could have said, "Oh, well, what this means is, go and buy a lottery ticket and put these numbers in,
Whoa,
or whatever it might
you'd
be."
you'd be in a bind if it didn't come to
If it didn't,
pass.
well, that's true. Yeah, yep, that's true.
So one thing I was going to say is that what we see, we talked about this last week, Jono, how when you get to the Joseph saga, it's different. It's different in that we don't have any theophanies or the appearances of angels or malachim or whatever. What we do have is we have a clear indication from the writer that God is orchestrating things at a very high level behind the scenes, and this plays out. It plays out in the story of Joseph. I have
Hmm.
several passages. I'll just read one of these or a couple of these if I can about how
Go
it
ahead.
was viewed that God was in control. And this is Genesis chapter 40 and verse 8. I'm backing up just a little bit. Page 226 in the Genesis Torah tablet, if people have it. But it says in verse 8, they said unto him, we have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And Joseph said unto them, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell it to me, I pray you. So we get this here, and in 41:16, I'll read this one more because it's clear that the writer wants us to know that the interpretation of these dreams, it's not to rely on a magician or even a Joseph, because Joseph is now giving credit to God on the understanding, or the writer. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Yeah, I'm with you.
So in 41:16 it says, and Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it's not in me. God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace.
Mm.
So we see the same thing that happens in Daniel 2:28. I'll
Mm.
just do this one just to make the connection, then we can move forward. He says, Daniel answered before the king and said, the secret which the king has demanded can neither wise men, enchanters, magician, nor soothsayers show unto the king. But there is a God in heaven. Boy, you can preach this one, Jono, that
Hmm.
revealeth secrets, and he hath made known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Then he goes on to tell him about the dream. So the idea is that, again, the parallels are striking. Hebrew slave,
Hmm.
basically working for a foreign ruler, gets this insight as to what the dream means from God, and it sets that person up for extreme favor in a
That's
foreign
right.
place.
Exactly. And that is the purpose of it. It sets that person up because they are the spokesperson of God. They will interpret the dream, and which is something evidently the dreamer cannot do. So they're now dependent on the person who can interpret and speak on behalf of God. And this is what happens in both cases. Yeah, no, very good.
I wonder, something that just hit me while I was going through the tour portion again this time for this particular episode, and
Mm.
that is that I wonder when these stories became known, and I don't know what degree some of these stories were known, say in Babylon or whatever. But you
Mm.
ever wonder if there was ever a Hebrew that said, now's the time, God, if you're going to help us in this situation, let something like this happen so that I can interpret. And, was there
Mm.
anybody who wanted to be that dream interpreter, that master or lord of the dreams among the Hebrew captives? I don't know. Just a
Don't know.
strange thought.
That's interesting. So verse 38 and 39, this caught my eye in chapter 41 because what it says, in fact, I'll just read it.
Okay.
Chapter 41, 38 and 39, and this is attributed to the E source. Okay, and Pharaoh said to his servants, once he's convinced that Joseph is the man, he says to his servants, will we find such a man as this, that God's spirit is in him? And Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made you know all of this, there is no one as understanding and as wise as you. And that reminded me, Ross, of Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 6 to 8. And the interesting thing about this is that this is embedded in a section that is derived from the Moses scroll. But
Okay.
this part here is an addition. This is like an insertion into the Moses scroll. And the Moses scroll is continued in chapter 6. But in any case, that's beside the fact. But what we have, this insertion, and this is, I think, attributed to the Deuteronomist, 4 verses 6 and 8, you shall observe them and you shall do them because it's your wisdom and your understanding before the eyes of the people, in that they will hear all of these laws and say, only a wise and understanding people is this great nation. Because who is a great nation that has a God so close to it, Elohim so close to it, like Jehovah, our God, in all our calling unto him. And I thought, yeah, okay, so very, very similar words. In fact, the same words, slightly different form used there, but a wise and understanding person speaking on behalf of God or acting on behalf of God.
You know, it's also just to kind of add to that. It's like anytime not anytime, but quite often in the Hebrew Bible, when you talk about the Spirit of God, you often find wisdom and understanding associated therewith. So this is, in some people's mind, this is indication of some sort of early wisdom literature. But wisdom and understanding, we have the case in, we'll get into this when we deal with the tabernacle in the book of Shemot in Exodus, where Betzalel and Aholiab, remember, they're the two spirit-filled guys. And what do they have? They have wisdom and understanding. And even in Proverbs 3, when the earth is created, it says that God did that with wisdom and understanding and knowledge. So you know, it's kind of it's almost a giveaway that this is some sort of early wisdom literature. We see it again, by the way, we see it in Daniel 4 too. Same thing. We won't go there. Yeah, but we see the same thing, wisdom and understanding.
So it doesn't surprise me. And as a result, Pharaoh's pretty chuffed with Joseph, and he gives him the daughter of a priest, Potiphar, right?
He gets all kind of door prizes. I mean, he gets quite a bit out of this. Yeah.
Tell me about the door. What's behind the door, Ross?
Here we go. Behind door number 1,
what does he want?
He is ranked as the second only to Pharaoh. Pharaoh says, "Look, of everything except the throne, you get it all." And this, by the way, is in 41:37 and following. He's over his house. He's over all the people. He's over all the land. He gets a signet ring, Jono, a signet ring, a brand new shiny. We see also a signet ring I had in my notes from chapter 38, verse 18, where Judah gives his signet away to Tamar. Remember, she plays the harlot, and he trades it.
The ring and the cords, and
And so then, but again, Joseph gets new garments. Remember, we talked about you got to watch those
change of wardrobe.
Changes. He gets a gold chain. I mean, he's blinged out. He's got a gold chain.
He's blinged. Now, by the way, before he was presented to Pharaoh, he's already been shaved, and he presents himself as an Egyptian to Pharaoh. So he's got a total wardrobe change entirely. Keep going.
And then there's something that, and I want to bring in just a couple of minutes. I want to bring in Ezra to get an opinion, but the names, some of these Egyptian words, I looked and just couldn't nail down with any certainty. So, for instance, when the parade would go through the streets and Joseph is being carried, I guess, through the streets, they would say abrek, and most study Bibles will say that means take the knee because it sounds like a Hebrew word, which means barak, to kneel, or to take a knee. But some of the more advanced linguistic works that I looked at said we really don't know what this means. The same with his name. Remember, he gets a special name. He's called Zaphanat Paneah. Now, I found, when I looked it up, it can mean, some said he lives. Some said it meant the God speaks and lives. The man he knows. This name that means somehow that God knows this person. Did you look that up? Did you see anything different than those?
I didn't investigate that, no.
But he does get an Egyptian wife, and I'm curious. Her name is Asenath. Is the way we pronounce it in Hebrew, Asenath. And from what I gather, that means, and there's pretty good certainty around this, that it means belonging to Niet, the Egyptian goddess Niet. So I wanted to ask Ezra a couple of things about this connection with Joseph as it pertains to Egypt. Who is the goddess Niet, and what do we know about that goddess?
Neith is a fascinating figure in Egyptian mythology, and while she doesn't directly appear in the story of Joseph, understanding her role sheds light on the cultural backdrop of his rise in Egypt. Neith is one of the oldest deities in the Egyptian pantheon, often associated with creation, war, and wisdom. She was a major goddess in the city of Sais in the Nile Delta and was sometimes referred to as the Great Mother or Mother of the Gods. Her symbols, like the shield and crossed arrows, emphasize her protective and martial attributes. What's intriguing is her connection to wisdom and weaving, a craft associated with creation itself. In Egyptian theology, weaving was a metaphor for how the universe was crafted, which aligns with Neith's role as a creative deity. Some traditions even credit her with originating the concept of Ma'at, the cosmic order that underpins Egyptian society. In the Joseph narrative, where he interprets dreams and engineers Egypt's survival strategy, we see echoes of the Egyptian ideal of divine wisdom. Pharaoh's recognition of Joseph as possessing the spirit of God may have resonated with Egyptian ideas of divine insight, often linked to figures like Neith. Her presence in Egyptian culture highlights the sophisticated theological environment Joseph navigated, where divine wisdom and practical leadership were deeply intertwined.
Huh. All right, so then I have a question, Ross.
Okay.
She is the daughter of Potiphar, right? This is, and whether it's the same Potiphar as the previous narratives. And he is the priest of On. And so my question is he a priest of Niat, or is he a priest of, is On an Egyptian god, or is it a location? Is it a place?
Good question.
And if you don't know, maybe we can ask.
Let's
ask Ezra.
ask Ezra. Yeah, about On, if it's a place or how did you put it?
Is On an Egyptian god, or is it a place? Because he's described as the priest of On.
The priest of On mentioned in the Joseph narrative refers to a place, not a deity. On, also known by its Greek name Heliopolis, was a prominent city in ancient Egypt dedicated to the worship of the sun god Ra. It was a major religious center, particularly revered for its connection to solar theology, and its priests were among the most influential in Egypt. When Joseph marries Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, the priest of On, it signifies his integration into the upper echelons of Egyptian society. Potipharah's title as a priest of On underscores the connection to Ra worship, highlighting how Joseph's position aligns him with Egypt's religious and political elite. This marriage would have cemented Joseph's status, as On was associated with great prestige. On itself had immense theological significance, as it was believed to be the location where the sun first rose at the dawn of creation. The city's prominence in solar worship also ties into broader themes of light and wisdom, perhaps paralleling Joseph's rise as a light in Egypt during a time of darkness brought on by famine. It's a symbolic detail that reflects his strategic and divine role in the narrative.
Interesting. So it is a location, and it's not just any location, but it's a location of major significance when it comes to solar worship and Ra and so on and so forth. So
and remember, that's where we find Israel in what is called Lower Egypt, which happens to be at the top of the map and not the bottom. Lower Egypt in the Nile Delta. So we have to wonder: is that's where this goddess Niet is worshipped? It's also it's
maybe
tied
she's the consort of Ra, or the consort of
it makes me want to dig into this little goddess worship and On and the priest of On and Potipharah. Some of the things that I looked at, Potipharah with the Ra on the end is sometimes associated with Ra as well. So,
all right, really, okay,
yeah, it's worth looking into. Yeah.
All right, okay, but the thing is that this event cements a priestly lineage into the line of Ephraim and Manasseh, which I find interesting, particularly if this is written at a later date, because all of these things would be motivated, right? And it reminds me of the verse, and I didn't have time to really look this up and give it too much thought, but you remember Jeroboam appoints what the Bible refers to as priests who were not priests.
Yeah.
But yeah, it right in this moment, Manasseh and Ephraim have priestly lineage. What they don't have, right? Or, well, let me put it another way. What they do have is also the lineage of Israel. One of my favorite verses, Ross, is Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 15, where Moses is saying, I gave I attached, well, God is saying, I attached to your fathers to love them
Yeah.
and their lineal seed after them. And that verse in Deuteronomy is derived from the Moses Scroll. And what we have throughout the Tanakh is a rule of patrilineal lineage. And this is problematic for the institution of Judaism, the religion of Judaism, because it has a rule of matrilineal lineage.
Right.
And I think this is from the time of, I don't know, it's been around for a couple of thousand years perhaps. And so the problem is, of course, Ross, Manasseh and Ephraim.
She's not Jewish.
She's not Jewish. Not Jewish.
Well, she has to convert, though. She has to convert. You know that it says that Asenath, because she obviously knew the rules, they knew the rules of the Talmud and so forth, so she had to convert, and that's exactly what she did. Now, I don't have the reference, Jono, but that's what I've heard. Have you heard that? I mean,
I have heard that. There is a rabbinic spin to explain this away. There's a Talmudic spin to say, yes, of course, she converted, and you need that for the institution of Judaism. And it's the same with, I mean, this is not an isolated case. You have, of course, Rehoboam has a Gentile mother. Absalom has a Gentile mother. King David, of course, Ruth.
I was going to say, David has a Moabitess for a grandmother.
Jesse, David, that whole line can't have that. And so Ruth has to convert. And you have stories for all of these. And you need them. You have to have them.
Yeah.
But according to, as I said, Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 15, you don't need them. And so this presents no problem whatsoever as far as the unbroken rule through the Tanakh is. What else have we got here? Oh, so 41, 51 to 52, unless you've got something before that.
No, go ahead. Talking about the birth of the boys, right?
Talking about the birth of the boys. I found this interesting because what we have here, it says 51 and 52. And Joseph called the firstborn's name Manasseh, because God made me forget all my troubles. That's what he says. God made me forget all my troubles and my father's house. He's forgotten.
Yep.
And he called the second one's name Ephraim, because God has made me fruitful in the land of my degradation. And the thing that crossed my mind, and this is highly speculative, and it's just honestly just a thought that crossed my mind only a couple of hours ago. The Moses Scroll, again, divides the tribes on Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. It does so in a patterned way, and we've spoken about this before, that isolates them to their mothers and references them in their birth order. As such, it presents, now it doesn't have the mother's names like Rachel, Leah, or Bilhah, none of that, but it does so in the order. It implies such. And the implication in the Moses Scroll is that the third mother, in this case, Rachel, gave birth, so it knows nothing of Joseph, right? So she gave birth to Manasseh, Ephraim, Benjamin in that order. And I thought that's interesting, because I thought, I wonder if there was an earlier record by which these words that we just read in verse 51 and 52 were actually once Rachel's. So I went back to chapter 30 and I had a look there, and it has, let me see, 30 verse 1b and 2. And this is all the e-source, by the way. If we read that, it says, and Rachel was jealous of her sister, and she said to Jacob, give me children, and if not, I will die. And Jacob's anger flared at Rachel, and he said, am I in place of God, who held back the fruit of the womb from you? And then it goes on to talk about Bilhah, here is my maid, and so on and so forth. Yep. We jump to 22, and God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb, and she became pregnant. And if we go to verse 51, and we have her instead of Joseph, and she called the firstborn Manasseh, because God made me forget all of my trouble and all of my father's house. And she called the second one's name Ephraim, because God made me fruitful in the land of my degradation. And I thought, that really maybe could be a possibility. And all of that is attributed to E. I wonder. I just wonder. I'd be interested in the viewers' comments if they have any comments on that. Your thoughts, Ross?
Well, I tell you, there is, and I think you mentioned Conrad Schmidt. He puts forward
Yeah, like Schmidt.
something. I don't know if I don't remember his exact theory. I have not yet read his book, but he has a book on Genesis that is in my to read this year list. So,
Yeah, it's pretty good.
but I think he puts forward something similar when it comes to Ephraim and Manasseh, because later we see those two often in place of Joseph, and some people have come up with other explanations for that, but yours is certainly on the table. Let me add one other thing about the names. You know, it is interesting that the names, I mean, just from a casual reading, if you say, I'm going to call this child Manasseh, he's made me forget my father's house. Well, every time you say the name, you're going to remember your father's house, right? So it's not really that effective. The other thing about names, sometimes these etymologies, it's a word that sounds like forget. It's a word that sounds like be fruitful. Levi is a word that sounds like the word in Hebrew that means to join to, but it's not actually that word. So there's some question around there. Do we really know what these names mean? A classic example for me is Moshe, because in the story, we'll get to this later, where I drew him from the water, so I called him Moses, because there's a word in Hebrew that sounds very similar to that. But in Egyptian, it actually means something else. We're going to see, Jono, that there are certain names in the Hebrew Bible that are clearly of Egyptian origin,
Egyptian
and
in
not
origin.
Hebrew origin. And there's
And
going
that
to be
shouldn't be
something
surprising, I
striking
guess.
about that. That's right. No, it's actually a thumbs up to some of the biblical narrative. But
So
we're
are
going
you
to
telling
ask the
me?
question is, why is that? Yeah.
Okay, so Manasseh and Ephraim, do they have Egyptian definition? What?
Well, I haven't found that. That's what I was asking. Do we
Okay.
really know what they mean? And I
Don't know.
think people have assigned those names to because of a very close sounding Hebrew word.
Yeah. Now, by the way, when you say when you point out that Manasseh, and I have forgotten my father's house, it's kind of an ineffective way of forgetting your father's house when you name your son.
Yeah.
And I looked at that too. I thought, I wonder if these are actually Rachel's words. What does that mean? And it reminded me of chapter 31, verses 14 to 16, where it says, just in the next chapter from the one that I read, and Rachel and Leah answered, and they said to him, do we still have a portion and legacy in our father's house? Remember, they kept getting screwed around by Laban. He was just tricking them into all sorts of nonsense. Aren't we thought of as foreigners by him because he sold us and has eaten up our money as well? Because the wealth of God has delivered us, has delivered from our father. It's ours and our children's, and now do everything that God has said to you. In other words, now that we are with you and that we have borne your children, we are free of our father. Why don't we just, get out from under him?
Yeah.
So Manasseh then may make perfect sense, now that she has given birth to a son to Jacob. So just throwing it out
Well,
there.
speaking of appearing as a stranger, where the girls say, "Look, we're treated like foreigners here." The one thing that is interesting as we move into chapter 42, we ready to move into 42 because
let's go to 42.
He as the old song is, he walks like an Egyptian, he talks like an Egyptian. They don't recognize him. He does, however, recognize them, obviously. What is interesting about this is that there is a play. This word, the root word, nun kaf resh, appears in this the story of Joseph in several places. And I won't read them, but in chapter 37, verse 33, remember when the boys bring the coat and they say, hey, you recognize this? Do you recognize this?
Yeah.
And that is that root word. Also, when Judah acknowledges that the items that Tamar has, that they belong to him, and he realizes
he
what's
acknowledges
going
that he
on,
recognizes them, yeah.
it's the same word. And then we see it in chapter 42, verse 7 twice, and then in verse 8 once. And it's all about he recognized them, they didn't recognize him. So the writer is telling us that this is a key to understanding. There's something which we have to recognize in the story. It's quite brilliant the way this is played into the text. Also, Jono, we don't see it for the rest of the Pentateuch. We just don't see it again.
Really? So there's just this little cluster right here. There's whoever is writing this. Yep. This is just a favorable word in their vocabulary, and they want to.
That's it.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Really? Okay.
Yep.
No, I didn't know that.
Yep.
What else you got there? Because I was going to go to 42:27, but maybe you've got some stuff before that.
I tell you what I do have is it's a little bit before that, and it's just a phrase that occurs time and again in this particular story, this back and forth between Joseph and the brothers. And that is that when he asks them, first he accuses them of being spies, and they begin to tell the story that, no, we have several of us, and there's one of our brothers who is not, one who is not. Yeah. And that phrase occurs in chapter 37, verse 30, in chapter 42, verse 13, and then 42:32 and 42:36. He is not. Now,
not. But it's an interesting way. The reason why they put that in there is because they say to Pharaoh, "We are 12 brothers, and one of them is not." Yeah, interesting. Yeah, keep going.
And so it really, as the story unfolds, the reader is. I mean, it's heartrending in a way because he hears for the first time that his brothers, he's not. In their eyes, he's no longer. And we do see, you brought this up last week in Jeremiah 31, verse 15, Rachel, where she says that she's weeping for her children. The English says, for they are not. In the Hebrew, it says, because he is not.
Because he is not, that's right.
He is
weeping
not, masculine,
for her
singular.
sons because he is not, and then it goes on to refer to Ephraim only. Not right. Benjamin, not Joseph, but Ephraim. Now, which is really curious, yeah.
Yeah, and then one other thing on that, he is not, they are not. When you get to Jacob's words later, he's going to say, Simeon is not, and Joseph is not, and Simeon is not. And now if I give you boys Benjamin, like you'll mess that up too. But the idea is that one is or he is not. And that's the whole story, is that Joseph is the one who is not. That's the message we get.
42, 27, and 28. So what we have here is... And one opened his sack to give fodder to his donkey, I'm going to say, at the lodging place, and he saw his silver, and here it was in the mouth of his bag. And he said to his brothers, my silver has been put back in my bag, and here too it's in my bag too. And they became afraid. Well, in verse 35, it seems like we have a doublet, Ross, and it is attributed to a different source. Verse 35 says, and it was, and here in this case, the first one was J, this is E, and it was that they were emptying their sacks, and here was each man's bundle of silver in his sack. And they saw the bundles of silver and their father, and they were afraid, and so on and so forth. So, just another case of...
No, I'm glad you brought that up, because if you read verse 25, 42:25, and then we're going to skip the J part. So read 25. Then Joseph commanded to fill their vessels with grain and to restore every man's money into his sack and to give them provisions by the way, and thus was it done unto them. And then you skip down to the verse you just read in verse 35, and it came to pass as they emptied their sacks that behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. So it flows perfectly. And when you separate those two stories out, what you get is the story of this episode in E and the story of it in J, and it's quite interesting.
So there's a little bit of juggling of E and J in this portion as well, particularly in chapter 42. Last week on your Shabbat program, you did an academia article for that one, and you separated them. Are you going to do the same for this one as well?
I might. I'm thinking very hard about it, because I think every chance you get, and then we have great discussions about that after, and people can see it. So even if people, and you and I would agree, I mean, this is a hypothesis, Jono. it's not that we're saying that everything about the documentary hypothesis is absolutely true and tested and proven. It is a hypothesis, and it is worthy of our consideration. But I think it's very interesting when you compare some of these things together, the different sources, and consider that that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, and when you say that, Ross, obviously different scholars will speculate on where those sources begin and end a little bit, and which verse may be attributed to which, but they mostly agree, is the point, generally speaking. And then there are some sections that are glaringly, obviously, two separate sources that just can't be denied.
That's right.
Again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, once you see it, you can't unsee it.
And my point was, even there are scholars who don't accept the documentary hypothesis, but even those scholars are aware that this is the theory to which you compare and contrast whatever theory someone else is coming up with. So it is absolutely that it's true, and it's very it's provable that we do have different sources. That's a fact. I mean, that's hard to dispute even.
So verse 36, I'm just going to read this because this is one of the weirdest verses in all of the Bible, in my opinion. Not 36, but actually 37. Verse 36, as you read, and their father Jacob said to them, "You've bereaved me. Joseph is not, Simeon is not, and you'll take Benjamin, and all of this has happened to me." And then Reuben says to his father, Ross, "Well, I'll tell you what. Look, I'm going to go and bring them back to you. And if I don't, then just how about you kill my two sons?"
That's he's putting it on the line. You know, in times past, I've used that as the extreme case of Reuben trying to get daddy's affection back.
Right.
You know, you can even do that. But
after sleeping with Bilhah, but it's a different source.
But remember, we had earlier, we had Judah was trying to save Joseph, and Reuben was trying to save Joseph. This story plays out in the same way. Just as Reuben offers a deal, "Hey, Dad, if this doesn't work right, then you can take my boys out." Judah, interestingly enough, if we can move to 43, chapter 43, verse 6 through 8, look at what it says here. 43, verse 6 through 8, and Israel said, "Wherefore dealt ye so ill with me as to tell the man whether ye had not a brother?" They said, "The man asked straightly concerning ourselves and concerning our kindred, saying, Is your father yet alive? Have you another brother? And we told him, according to the tenor of these words, could we in any wise know that he would say, Bring your brother down? And Judah said unto his father Israel, Send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and thou, and also our little ones. And he says, I'll be a surety for him. Of my hand shalt you require him, if I bring him not unto thee and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. Now, what I find striking about Judah's offer, remember how chapter 38, felt like it was just totally inserted in the middle of the Joseph saga, and it felt awkward. It was so different. You're just reading along Joseph, and then you get Judah. But what we saw in 38, this is again a masterful work of the final editor, I believe, is Judah goes through a similar loss. Remember, Jacob has just said, Simeon is gone and Joseph is gone. He's lost two sons to these boys already. And what Judah says is, and this is me sort of paraphrasing, but I feel like Judah is saying, hey, Dad, I've lost two sons as well. I lost Er and Onan. Yeah. And he's the only one that could really, and because I think, again, this is me speculating, but I almost feel like the writer wants us to feel that with Jacob looking at Judah in his eyes saying, you know what I feel then. Yeah, I'll trust you. And he does trust him.
You know, you could be right about that. And this is, both of these are the J source. Yeah. And that is, as one who has lost, their firstborn son, my firstborn son, Jonah, it is one of those things that it is a perpetual horror that you learn to live with, but you know, you have no idea how horrific it is until it happens, and then you know, I was thinking about this today, and maybe it's because I'm working on this. In success, in following years, you then see, because I think most parents, understandably, would shelter their own minds from these thoughts, because it's not something you want to dwell on. But after something like this happens, then you see that it's not something as uncommon as you wish it were. I guess I could say that. And unfortunately, Dave and Patty Tyler also have experienced such a thing. But when you talk to someone who has endured that kind of pain, you know that they understand it, and only they really truly understand it. There's a bond, but there's an understanding of understanding, if I can say it like that. And you hope that a parent never ever has that insight. But for someone who has experienced it, you know that they understand what you're feeling. And so in that case, yeah, sure, Judah may be putting that to Jacob, saying, you know that I know what this is like. You can trust me to bring them back, because I understand the importance of this. And quite possibly.
I think for me, when I read it, I see that is a possibility, because even though it doesn't explicitly state it, you and I, the reader, will see, oh, okay, only he could, Reuben can't relate. So anyway, I find that very striking.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
A couple of other narrative details quickly. I do find that in J, there are little subtle clues that the writer carries, and it's only in that source. So, for instance, in J, when in chapter 37 and verse 25, this is where Joseph is picked up and taken into Egypt. Those who are taking him are carrying certain items, including balm and so forth. And we see, and that's in 37 verse 25. And we see also in J, chapter 43:11, when Jacob sends his boys to go to Egypt, he says, oh, by the way, bring these things with you, and it's similar items. So now, in some ways you could say, well, you're kind of stretching that. Those are items that were, in the region and so forth. But it is interesting. It's like a narrative continuity that is there in J in 37 as well as 43. It's just something I wanted to bring out.
Yeah, 43 verse 11, a little balm, a little honey, gum, and myrrh. Pistachios and almonds, I like those.
Yes,
there you go. And take a little bit of silver in your hand. I would be on, and then we have an interjection here in 43 in verse 14 from E in the middle of J, and may El Shaddai give you mercy before the man, so he'll send your other brother and Benjamin to you, and if I am bereaved, I am bereaved. That is there. I could almost jump to 44 unless there's anything else that you want to bring out of 43.
No, I'm ready. I'm ready for 44, I think.
So Miketz ends in chapter 44 about halfway through, right? And this first section of 44 is a little section I like to call, hey, that's my lucky divination cup.
Yeah.
And this always makes people a little bit, I don't know, nervous perhaps, Ross, because they're thinking, what do you mean he's got a divination cup? Joseph has a divination cup. Does he really, or is this just part of the ruse? Is this just part of the play? Or does he actually have a divination cup, Ross, and does he use it for divination? What are your thoughts?
I tell you, I think he does. He at least has a divination cup, whether he uses it or not. But you have to wonder, like you said, it does make people nervous because we like to think of our Joseph as being, a pure monotheist and so forth. But we don't want to picture him looking over his cup like my cup here, and he's got tea leaves and chicken gizzards, and he's got some kind of magical potion. But something is going on, and he slips it. He puts it in the bag. So we're gonna. I mean,
So this is
what do you
this
think?
is a treasured.
Is it a divination
it's a treasured.
cup?
It's a divination cup, and so therefore it's a special cup, and he slips it in the bag because it's a thing of particular value to him, by which he can say to them, "You guys are really in trouble now." And
Yeah.
but the thing that I find interesting about this is that he's already claimed, he has said to Pharaoh, "Hey, I'm the man that can tell you. God will tell me, and then I will tell you, right, Pharaoh?"
Yep.
And he's fine with that. If that's the case, why not use a divination cup? I mean, after all, what is the Umim and the Tumim, Ross, and how do they work?
Hey, I know it. I know it. It's another thing that's missing, by the way. I can tell you that.
Mm.
The
And
Urim
is
and
not
the
that,
Tumim.
yeah, the Urim and the Tumim, and are not they implements of divination? I mean, you're asking God, and we see in other places too where lots are cast in
Yeah, I
order
was going to
to
say. Yep.
yeah. So and the Urim and the Tumim. So why not a divining cup?
Well, it certainly is great part of the plot because sure enough, they take off and the boys have the cup. Now, let me tell you what it reminded me of too, Jono, is that again, these patriarchal narratives oftentimes will match in certain details or have certain connections. Like, remember when Jacob and the girls leave Laban, they take the father's gods and they put them in their sack. And, remember, Laban's all bent out of shape. You stole my gods. And so, and then later in the story, Jacob has to tell him at Bethel, you need to go bury those gods, which means that
Under
Jacob knew that they had the gods with them when they left Laban. So again, he's not free of all this either. So we do get these ancient stories that are mixing elements of different people's cultures and their religions and their worship practices. Really weird stuff.
Yeah. And then this story, it's interesting. It cuts off, our Torah portion cuts off, and then it seems almost like mid-narrative, but it picks up again. And at the end of this section, I think it goes to verse 17, it does.
That's right.
It revolves around the cup, and then Judah is the one again standing in and taking charge, and he continues on in Vayigash, which is next week, and he's the one that really stands up and sort of takes charge of the situation. Once again, to Mama MacGyver and Claudie's point, this is Jay, and Jay really is favouring Judah. We see that. Yep. That's where we're going to pick up next week. Is there anything else that we want to touch on?
Vayigash, man, I look forward to this. This is an exciting one. We've covered quite a bit, and we only have a couple more of these in Genesis. We've got a couple more. We're going next to Exodus. We got a couple more weeks to wrap it up, but I wanted to say, Jono, if I can, for those who want to get the Exodus Torah tablet, it is up, and the link is in the description of this video. So just a friendly reminder, we've got time, a couple of weeks, but order them now so you got them when we get ready to jump in the book of Exodus.
I'm just looking at it now, Ross. This is going to be a big program, the next program. There is a lot in this one. All right.
Oh, yeah.
We'll be there this time next week, and until then, dear viewers, have a great one. Ezra, take us out.
Shalom, friends. That wraps up another deep dive into Torah Pearls. As we reflect on Joseph's story in Miketz, let's remember the layers of transformation, reconciliation, and divine purpose woven throughout the narrative. Whether it's dreams, famine, or family drama, these stories continue to speak to us across time. Keep digging into the text and uncovering those pearls of wisdom. Until next time, shalom and blessings to you all.